Ngunit kahit hindi pa tapos nga ang pagbibilang, hindi makapag-antay ang aking pasasalamat sa inyong lahat.
Alam kong mahal natin ang bansa, pero hindi pwedeng maging ugat pa ng pagkakawatak-watak ang pagmamahal na ito.
Good morning. It's been a day after the national polls have opened. Partial and unofficial results are in. Some candidates are expected to be proclaimed, but some voters, as of this morning, have yet to cast their votes. Well, we'll look into these issues and more in today's coverage. I'm Cito Beltran.
And I'm Danie, Laurel. We are delivering the news to you live from the One News Data Monitoring Center over here in Mandaluyong. This is Bilang Pilipino 2022.
All sides, all the time. We're going to dive right in on the latest count of the partial and unofficial votes of the presidential and vice presidential race.
Where the tandem of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte are leading by a large margin. Paulo, what do you have for us? You've been up all night, by the way.
I've been up all night. I'm here early morning. The news never sleeps. And this is what we do here in the One News
Paulo,
Data Monitoring
napansin
Center.
ko, Lasal color siya tayong Philippines.
All the colors yan, pero we're talking about data transmission kasi. So, dito,
I see. Okay.
Oo, dito sa data transmission, 95.70%. This is, of course, as of 7:47 a.m. a while ago. And of course, the bulk of the results are in. And we've seen the news throughout, even the earliest counts, that former Senator Bongbong Marcos has a incredible lead here. 30,441,000 against VP Danie Robredo's 14,502,000. And of course, rounding up the top three, third place, Senator Manny Pacquiao with 3.4 million. If you see here, makita natin dito, the heat map showing us just how the votes and where the votes came from. Up here in the north and down south, almost everything consolidated for former Senator Bongbong Marcos. VP Leni doing very well in the middle of the country in the Visayas region. But then crucially, losing out here in Cebu, the top one vote-rich province here, with former Senator Bongbong Marcos carrying 1.5 million votes there. If you remember, Governor Gwen Garcia did promise 1 million votes for former Senator Bongbong Marcos, and based on this, well, you can see that she did deliver on that promise. Now, apart from Cebu and looking at the entire pink and red scheme that we have here in terms of the national votes, only one province did not vote the way of former Senator Bongbong Marcos and VP Leni Robredo, and that is Sarangani province, where Senator Manny Pacquiao carries a vote here with 150,000, and coming in second, former Senator Bongbong Marcos with 75,000. Now, that's how it looks like in the presidential picture, but then we're gonna go and see just how it is in the vice presidential race, wherein it is an even wider margin here in favor of Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte with 30 million votes coming in, and Kiko Pangilinan with 9 million votes, with most of the votes for him coming here in the middle of the country as well. But then apart from that, sea of green here for Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. Tito Soto does win one province, and that province is Sorsogon, where he carries a vote with 169,000, and Kiko Pangilinan coming in second with 154,000 votes. Now, still, the transmissions are coming in, and of course, when we look at the national race, there's always going to be talk about how the Senate race is going as well. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen how this has panned out as well. And if we take a look at this, Robin Padilla is still number one with the Senate race, and of course, not a lot of opposition voices in the so-called Magic 12. Riza Ontiveros right now hanging on at the 11th spot. And looking in though, Jojo Binay at number 13 with 1 million or so votes away from Jinggoy Estrada, who's hanging on to the 12th.
Paolo, just to clarify for our viewers here, I think we did that throughout last night's broadcast, but what is the difference between the transmitted number and the ones that are actually being counted? Because, those percentages are quite important, diba? People think that 95% na yung nabilang, but actually that's not really the case.
Well, we're calling it partial and unofficial count for a reason. So we cannot say that these numbers are already what the final numbers are going to be. There's still going to be canvassing, and there's still going to be an entire process here that that's also going to be the reason why some of the national positions won't be proclaimed until later on in the week. So right now, at the moment, even if we have these numbers in, we already see the margins, especially the larger ones, and we are able to estimate on who will get the spots that are being contested right now. And of course, when we take a look at the two highest offices, as we saw a while ago, president and vice president, the results we're just basically waiting for the official confirmation of these positions in particular.
Okay, it's just a matter of math already.
Yes.
It's not so much contestable.
Paolo, I think there's going to be great interest regarding number 11, 12, and 13.
Correct.
Yes.
Could you highlight that, please? Because from this distance, I would need a telescope to see the difference in numbers.
Well, right here. So I'm going to try and make things easier for you here. So
Okay.
we're going to zoom in here at the
There, 11, 12, and 13.
11, 12, and 13. Now, in 11, 12, and 13, Riza Ontiveros is almost cracking the 15 million mark.
Okay.
At the Jingoy Estrada's 14.6 million, while Jojo Binay with 12.9 million. Again,
So with Binay, it's 13 million, or if you round it
Round it
off,
off, yes.
it's nearly 13 million. So
Malayo-layo
Yeah,
pa rin.
malayo-layo lang.
malayo siya from the
Estrada, oo.
Magic 12.
yes. Interesting to note, so we talked about transmissions just a while ago, and we're going to take a look at the transmission here nationally. Again, 95.7% of the precincts have already transmitted, and we also look at the voter turnout for this entire election period. And for majority of it, we expected a higher turnout here because it is a presidential election, and majority of the country with over 80%, but then some key provinces here too, rather with below 60%.
Okay, thank you, Paulo. And at the moment, incumbent Pasig City Mayor Vico Soto is proclaimed as re-elected mayor of Pasig City. We have Mayor Vico himself on the phone to discuss his victory. Congratulations, Mayor!
Congratulations!
Magandang umaga po, Sir Cito, Ma'am Daniela.
Okay,
Thank you.
kamusta naman ang naging experience niyo, Mayor Vico, regarding this campaign? Do you think it's going to be a smooth, continuity for you, or nababasa mo ba kung maraming magiging protesta na naman dyan?
Well, okay naman po. We're very happy with the results of the elections. Para sa akin, malinaw na yung resulta na ito. Malinaw yung tinig ng lungsod ng Pasig at ang bawat Pasigenyo na tuloy-tuloy ang pagbabago sa aming lungsod, at kailangan paigtingin pa natin yung mga nasimulan na natin.
Mayor, a lot were expecting this victory for you and possibly also yourself. It was a landslide victory. But your opponent, Io Bernardo, has mentioned he is not ready to concede the Pasig mayoralty. He did even mention that he may have been cheated. What is your reaction po to this?
Hayaan mo na sila kung karapatan naman nila yan, kung anong tingin nila, anong opinion nila. Pero malinaw naman yung boses ng taong bayan. So, I wish him all the best. I wish him peace of mind, and hopefully we can all work together for what is good for Pasig City.
Okay, kasama mo ba si Dudut, Mayor, at nanalo ba si Dudut Jaworski?
Yes, actually, ang dahilan kung ba't masayang-masaya po talaga ako ay dahil ngayon, magkakaroon ako ng pagkakataon na maglingkod as mayor for the first time with a vice mayor and an overwhelming majority of Sangguniang Panlungsod members that believe in our vision and mission for the city, yung naniniwala sa mga pinaglalaban natin.
Mayor Vico, what's going to be different this time around in your second term? We also have a new administration, of course, coming. How is this going to affect po your continuity plans? What are you going to be retaining? What will you be changing?
Well, definitely, we want to improve on the things that we've started. We want to continue the things that have been maybe delayed, yung mga naantala dahil sa pandemya. But we're very, very optimistic. Kasi ngayon na meron tayong mayorya sa Sangguniang Panlungsod at kasama natin yung Vice Mayor at Congressman, si Congressman Roman, ay ibig sabihin, kung ano yung nagawa natin nung nakaraang 3 taon, mas magagawa natin ng mas maganda, mas mabilis, mas maayos sa susunod na 3 taon. So we're very happy, we're very optimistic for the next 3 years.
Okay, what are your plans in terms of unity? Kasi mukhang yan ang magiging big word, political big word or theme, as Danie mentioned, in this next 3 years as far as Pasig is concerned. Pag sasama-samahin mo ba, will you reach out? Is there a plan in place for this?
Para sa akin, basta't ang nakararami sa mga Pasigenyo ay sumasang-ayon, naniniwala, at tumutulong sa mga pagbabago na pinapatupad natin sa lungsod ng Pasig, ay magiging maayos at smooth sailing po tayo. Hindi naman posible na lahat ay magiging masaya. Sabi nga, you cannot please everyone at all times. So talagang may kukontra. Siyempre, lalo na yung mga dating kumikita, dating pinagkakakitaan ng ating gobyerno sa mga paraan na illegal, yung mga kumikickback dati, pinutol natin yung kickbackan sa mga nasanay masyado dun sa lumang kalakaran. Hindi na nila magawa yung mga lumang kalakaran nila. So, syempre, galit na galit po yan sa akin. Pero sa akin, ang importante, ang nakararami sa mga Pasigenyo ay sumasang-ayon at pinakita naman nila ito sa resulta ng halalan.
Okay. Mayor Vico, most of your past 6 years have been on COVID response. Is that still going to be the theme as you go back? For you, election season is over. I assume you will be hitting the ground running. What's your first point in your agenda?
Well, when the pandemic hit in 2020, of course, we had to focus on COVID, especially in the first ECQ. The focus was on increasing the capacity for healthcare system to deal with COVID-19. But even if we were in the middle of the pandemic, we did not stop with our other plans, projects, and programs. Sa serbisyong pangkalusugan na lang, nasimulan namin yung pagpapatupad ng no balance billing sa 2 ospital. Nag-rationalize kami ng City Health Department, creating thousands of new plantilla positions, and we've started to hire, for our health centers and 2 city hospitals. Yung mga repair, maintenance, rehabilitation ng mga health centers, yung iba matatagal ng mga dilapidated, ngayon napaayos na. And even in the middle of the pandemic, I could go on and on, pero ang punto ko lang ay hindi porket COVID ay COVID lang yung tinutukan natin. We still continued with everything else, larangan ng edukasyon, and ease of doing business, anti-red tape, and everything else that the government is supposed to do.
Okay, and I correct myself, there 3 years pala, you're very new in office 2019. So
yan.
again, you do have a lot still on your hands and a lot of those plans in continuation as well. So again, congratulations, Mayor Vico, and thank you very much for spending your time this morning.
Before you go, we wish you all the best. We pray for God's blessings to be upon you, Dodot,
thank you.
all of Pasig. Thank you, Mayor Vico.
Salamat, sir.
Maraming salamat. God bless din po.
Okay, I couldn't refrain from saying that because he used to be in my children's church.
Nako.
My God, how I
So
feel
you can
so
vouch
old.
naman for his character. Okay, well, indeed, that was an unexpected landslide win, and so one that we are able to break this morning. Now, circling back, of course, to the national races, Bongbong Marcos appears poised to be the next president of the country with over 30 million votes in the partial and unofficial vote tally. But How has Marcos Jr.'s track record in politics been like? Let's get to know him a little bit more in this video.
Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr., or more commonly referred to as Bongbong Marcos. Bongbong is the second child and only son of former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and former First Lady Imelda Marcos. His sister Amy has been a senator since 2019. His father, Ferdinand Sr., was a representative of the 2nd District of Ilocos Norte when he was born and became senator 2 years later. And as the saying goes, like father, like son. Bongbong Marcos was elected as representative of Ilocos Norte's 2nd Congressional District from 1992 to 1995. Marcos Jr. then ran for and was elected governor of Ilocos Norte again in 1998. After 9 years, he returned to his previous position as representative from 2007 to 2010. Then became senator under the Nacionalista Party from 2010 to 2016. In 2015, Marcos ran for vice president in the 2016 election but lost to Leni Robredo. Now, Marcos Jr. is vying to become the 17th president of the Republic of the Philippines.
Okay, from that, let's now go to Vice Presidential candidate Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte Carpio, who has maintained her lead steadily in the partial and unofficial vote results. Let's get to know her political career better through this video.
Born and bred in Davao City, Sara Duterte is commonly known as the presidential daughter of President Duterte. She has 2 brothers, making her the only girl in the family. This, though, did not stop her from following her father's path, who had long experience in the local politics scene in Davao. PRRD had won 7 terms and served as the city mayor for more than 22 years. As for Sara, she served as a vice mayor in Davao for 1 term from 2007 to 2010 and won the mayoral seat for 2 separate terms from 2010 to 2013 and 2016 to 2022. She is the city's first female mayor and the youngest to be ever elected in its history. Aside from these, she was also the former chairperson of political party Lakas Christian Muslim Democrats and the present chairperson for Hugbong ng Pagbabago.
Isa ang nasa isip kong sabihin sa inyo. Maraming salamat.
Some Filipinos voted for Bongbong Marcos because of his name and his father's polarizing legacy.
But for some of Marcos Jr.'s supporters, it was his promised continuity of the Duterte administration that may have convinced them to vote for him. Let's take this time to go over his platforms. All right, so Cito, you know, he did not, of course, appear in several debates, but he has been very vocal about continuing certain policies and reforms that he had implemented during his terms in the Senate, but also over in Ilocos. For example, a very strong focus on agriculture, a very strong focus on the renewable energy sector. What are your thoughts on this in relation to President Duterte and what he has achieved so far in the 6 years of office? Is this really a continuation of the Duterte administration?
I don't want to get into trouble here, but I have to confess, when you were talking about platforms, I was kind of puzzled.
Okay.
Because if anything, that was what was lacking in Bongbong Marcos's campaign, to properly lay out the platforms. Because so much emphasis was made over unity, to the point that people mocked it, people made fun of it. Because, in fact,
But it seems to have resonated with the voting public. I mean, if you look at the numbers, this simple, let's say, message of unity versus perhaps complex platforms.
You can make unity a platform, but how do you get there? Unity is the destination, but what bus do we ride to get there? So I'm not mocking, I'm not being anti or anything here, but that was something that was not clear to me. When you were saying about the continuity of the Duterte administration, are we talking about continued COVID vigilance, investment in healthcare? Are we talking about the anti-drug EJK
Or
campaign?
build,
Or
which
build,
is what
build,
he's
build?
most known
Because
for.
that has to be made clear. And I think that was the frustration of media from the very start. The media wanted to hear his platform so people could know. But the campaign was essentially based on that word unity. It was based on TikTok. And so many of us remain, clueless. In fact, this morning, if you ask most of the journalists, you ask them, what do you think will be his priority? And the answer is, malay ko.
Tama naman. But then at the same time, this, I guess what the public also appreciated was his or their ability as a tandem to set aside perhaps, political ambitions. For instance, Sara Duterte was, leading in the presidential race. And of course, joining forces, so to speak, from the north to the south. And this, as you mentioned, being the platform. Tama ka naman, diba? It's not so much the projects, but the
let's
the
ask this young
unification.
whippersnapper.
Yeah, and we can see that in the colors,
yung boto
north
daw,
and south
yung
are
boto daw
red.
kasi boto ng kabataan eh. Sige nga, magsalita nga kayo.
Well, thanks, Cito. Siyempre, nakita natin sa surveys that at least in the lead-up to the election, the majority of the youth vote would go to BBM. And well, based on what we've seen so far, yes, that did. But to piggyback on the point that Danie mentioned a while ago, how the Duterte vote from 2016 did carry over here to BBM. We actually have the chance to take a look at that from a color visuals perspective.
yeah.
Let's take a look at that here. Ito po ang heat map natin from the 2016 presidential elections where President Rodrigo Duterte carried majority of the southern parts of the Philippines, and of course the Balance Luzon area, as well as the NCR. Now, if you notice, the north was more on the side of Grace Poe and Jojo Binay, and then the middle part of the country, in terms of the Visayas, was for Mar Rojas. Now, we go back here to how the heat map looks today. And all of the areas where former Senator Bongbong Marcos in 2016, let's take a look at his heat map, he did not do very well here in the south. He did carry NCR and Balance Luzon. But then you can see that this was an area where he distinctly lost in, especially here in vote-rich Cebu. That changes dramatically here in the presidential race here in 2022, wherein Cebu goes very strongly towards BBM. The entirety of the south, almost, apart from Sarangani province, which goes to Manny Pacquiao, goes the way of BBM. You even have parts of Visayas that were contested and won by VP Leni, now swinging the way of BBM as well. So yes, there is an argument to be made that the Duterte vote that happened in 2016 did go to Bongbong Marcos.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind. So just pursuing what both of you said, clearly what happened here was Bongbong Marcos was able to sew it all together.
Correct.
Ika nga sa Tagalog,
Geographically,
tinahi nila,
specifically, yeah.
pinagsama yung Duterte-Marcos vote.
Yes.
So it is a political move. It is not a political platform.
Correct.
Yes.
It's,
Actually, we can
just by the math alone, diba? If you just make everything status quo from the 2016 elections, that's it, diba? It's
Yeah.
exactly that.
We can actually see that also in the survey. We're going to try to bring that up in the LED wall here, where we can see the entire surveys from the beginning of 2020. Because what happened was that there is a point in time wherein Davao Mayor Sara Duterte did say that she will no longer run for president, and then all of a sudden, you had Bongbong Marcos suddenly take off. We see here the presidential preferences by class and, of course, by age group. We talked about the youth vote a while ago. Cito, and you can see here, Bongbong Marcos actually the strongest there. And if you go down the line and try and figure out where VP Leni did well, you actually have some of the people who did experience martial law back. Still voting. This time, this is actually where she also was relatively strong based on her base here on the survey. So
Paolo,
interesting
quick
to note
question,
there.
no? Are there any surprises in terms of the survey results on at least the areas in the map where VP Leni should have won, at least based on the surveys, and did not?
Well, we do have access to data again throughout the entire, from the entire survey, and of course, we actually have the results coming from 2016 that we can compare to, and of course the survey. But here's what I was referring to a while ago, before we get into that, Danie, wherein Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte did say she was no longer running for president and became part of the tandem of BBM, and there you have it. And then Bongo, also a Duterte candidate, decided not to run for president. That went away as well. We're not quite sure if it did contribute to the vote for BBM. But then the partnership for BBM with Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte really coincided with the big jump in the survey.
This
and
despite not having the endorsement, the official endorsement of the president.
Yes, and a lot of people did see that as a soft form of endorsement because of the fact that she was running with the presidential daughter. Now, if you look at we're going to try to bring up Cluster 8 as well so we can answer your question.
Yeah.
So we see here the regions that VP Leni did win, and in a while we're going to see just how the survey numbers correlate to it, because we did get a chance to see it a while ago, and the gaps were actually relatively close. We're going to see Cluster 8 in just a bit.
Meaning no surprises.
Yes, so
okay,
here it is right
surprises.
now. So let's take a look at the VP race via region so we can have a better look. The presidential race rather by a region. Let's start out first with NCR here. And if you see here, Bongbong Marcos was supposed to carry it, according to the survey, 57 points. He won NCR by 55%. If you look down the line here, VP Leni did win in Barm and Caraga back in 2016. You go back and look at the survey here, it says that BBM will take that by 61%. You look at Barm here, as the official results come in, 59.55%. So relatively close, relatively accurate, even when you look at the regions that did flip from Marcos to Robredo, from Robredo to Marcos rather. And if for those who have been espousing the Pulse Asia survey and the other surveys as scientific tools that could accurately reflect the elections, well, based on these numbers so far, yes, it does reflect in what we've seen here.
Okay, very interesting there. Is this, Paolo, I don't know if you can answer this question. Is this the first time that we've seen surveys so accurately predict what is likely outcome?
I cannot say about the gap, but then the surveys have been accurate all the way back to 1992 in terms of predicting who the winner would be. Now, in terms of the gaps and actually how big it is, that is interesting. But if you look at the VP race, on the other hand, if you remember, majority of the votes, majority of the surveys did list Tito Soto as the number 2 candidate.
Yeah, this was the big surprise in the VP race, no?
And but on the end, then here with the results coming in, Kiko Pangilinan at number 2. But the surveys did also show that it would be a very big gap in between number 1 and number 2, and that is held true.
You know, for the longest time that you've been doing those presentations, Paulo, I have been doing my Take 7, Math 11, and it seems that even if I added up all of the also-rans, they still couldn't come together to come close enough to the leader of the group. Like in Duterte, if you put together Soto and Pangilinan, it's still far. and even with the rest of the VP candidates, and even for the presidential. Anyway,
We have, of course, a lot to be digesting here still this morning. And to help us in this discussion, let's listen into this interview of our colleague Cheryl Cosim with Marcos Jr. on her show, Candida Talks.
So sa Administrasyong Marcos, makakakita po ba tayo ng magre-reach out po kayo sa opposition, mag-a-appoint po ba kayo ng taga-opposition so, sakali pong palaring kayo?
Hindi ako mag-a-appoint ng tao dahil ka-partido ko. Hindi ko rin mag-a-appoint ng tao dahil hindi ko kapartido. Mag-a-appoint ako ng tao dahil magaling sila at handa silang tumulong sa Pilipinas. Yun lang naman ang criterion dyan eh. Hindi mo naman kailangan isipin. Tapos na, as far as I'm concerned, pag natapos, May 9, nag-decide na sinerte tayo at na ipanalo ko yung halalan. O di, kung sino yung pinakamagaling, kailangan ko na magaling na expert sa ekonomiya, kailangan ko na magaling na expert sa agrikultura, sa MSMEs, sa energy, sa education. Lahat yung mga sektor na yan, sa infrastructure, lahat yan, kailangan ko yung magaling. Kung sino yung pinakamagaling, sumama ka sa akin, hindi natin kasama sa eleksyon yan, hindi na bale. Basta gustong tumulong sila, talagang tapat sila, natutulong sila. Hindi papasok para siraan ka lang. Di ba? Bakit hindi? Kailangan natin lahat eh. Kailangan natin na hindi tayo pwedeng nagsasabi, itong grupong ito, lahat yan. May magaling diyan eh. May mahuhusay yan eh. Kumbinsihin mo na hindi ko ginagawa ito pampolitika, ginagawa ko ito para makatulong tayo. Ang dami mong magagawa, maitutulong mo sa atin.
Now, and if elected into office, what will the former senator's priority programs be in his first 100 days? Here's another Candidatox clip.
Ano ang mga prioridad ninyong programa o plataforma sa unang 100 araw ng Marcos administration?
Sa unang 100 araw, mamili ka ng pinakamagaling na tao. Yun ang pinaka-importante. Kasi kahit na anong gawin mo, kahit napakaganda ng plano mo, kung mahina yung nakuha mo, walang mangyayari. So, ang mangyayari nun, mag-start, tapos makita mo 6 months later, mahina pala ito, papalitan natin. Di ba? Maglalagay ka ng bago, mag-umpisa ka na naman. So, para sa akin, ang priority, kung makakuha tayo ng magagaling na tao na papasok sa gobyerno at magpapatakbo ng iba't ibang sektor na alam nila yung trabaho nila. Mga expert sila doon. Sila na yung pinakamagaling na makuha mo doon sa lugar na yun. Hindi dahil malaking kontribusyon na sa kampanya, hindi dahil kaibigan mo na matalik at best friend mo or something, pero dapat dahil talagang may kakayahan. Yun ang importante sa lahat. Alam mo, anybody who has been in any kind of corporate structure or yung ganun, sasabihin, kahit napakaganda ng plano mo, kahit napakaganda nung pagkagawa mo ng organizational chart mo, kung mahina yung tao na nandun, wala ring mangyayari. Kaya yun ang pinakaunang dapat pag-isipan.
Pinag-iisipan nyo na po ba yan? May listahan na po ba kayo? Meron na kayong mga taong in mind sakaling talaga po kayong palari na susunod na Pangulo? May shortlist na ba, Sen?
I do not allow myself to think that far. Sabi ko, ang pag-iisip ko ngayon, nasa kampanya lamang hanggang sa eleksyon. Ngayon, siyempre, maraming nagsasabi sa akin, si ganito magaling, si ganito. Siyempre, I take note of that.
okay.
So don't think daw muna too far ahead. I think that answers your question. No? Focus daw muna on the campaign, on winning. That was the main reason that was given on why.
Your Honor, I disagree. I have been saying that in so many campaigns, so many elections, that people who want to run in the executive must have a prepared list of cabinet members way in advance. Kasi ang dami
But it's
namang
so-
magaling sa Pilipinas.
It's so polarizing din kasi,
Yeah.
di ba? I mean,
And it's subject to suspicion.
Yeah, this was not expected. I mean, from the get-go, di ba? There were several candidates at the beginning that were all, in the running. Really, it just became a two-way race towards
And
it.
look, you've got a president for 6 years. It looks long enough, but in a few months, President Duterte is gone. how many months did it take him to go through so many cabinet members? Now, we're going to go through this again. This is not about personalities. We need to have a system and a culture where cabinet members are laid out long before the election day so that we at least know that if this president wins, we know who's going to run the economy, the agriculture, etc., etc. Because as all the experts...
No, it seems pretty obvious. To me, it seems that it was, and that was his platform naman. I won't say the word platform kasi we disagree. That was his, theme, his unifying theme na continuity, add whatever is there in terms of economic theme, retain
the former
economic
cabinet
theme.
members?
In a certain sense, yes, there's less expectation, at least from the business community, from the economic community. If you ask the economists, diba, they will say they will retain the economic theme of Duterte, or at least the economic policies. And not just that, Cito, remember, we are looking at the next 12 years, possibly, because it's always natural, and we had the political analyst last night saying that the VP is naturally slated to run for president. Always, diba? It's actually a shock if the VP does not. So, this is a continuity program of 18 years.
But
Duterte,
you forget
Marcos,
something.
Duterte continuity program,
You
perhaps.
forget something, Eddie. Eddie, paano naman si Eddie? All of these people who supported Bongbong Marcos are going to be cashing in their chips. And they will all say, I helped you, so you must choose my nominee, or you must choose our... time and again, we have seen presidents lament the fact that they have been put under pressure by religious groups, political groups, economic groups, and private interests. So that's the problem when you now will spend the next 2 months picking and choosing on a potential cabinet member, in light of the fact that by next week, 1 week from now, whoever becomes president should have a team that is rock and roll, lock and load, and let's get on with the show.
But Cito, on that note, I want to throw it back to Paulo in the senatorial race because cabinet is one issue that is appointed, diba? This is elected, and you can see that these are the people that will pass the laws, and how aligned are they to pass the laws, that have been there languishing possibly, for many years. Go ahead, Paulo, and show us we had this nice chart also with gestures showing who are likely to be aligned, who are likely to oppose whatever is being touted in the Senate. Go ahead.
So just a reminder of just how the Senate race is looking right now, and obviously majority of them are supporters of President Rodrigo Duterte and for former Senator Bongbong Marcos. Again, the lone opposition voice here being Risa Ontiveros. Now, we saw a while ago, actually, earlier on the show when I was with Jovi and Mase, we did have a chance to take a look at the potential political alignments of a Bongbong Marcos presidency based on some of the holdovers and the possible winners that we had a while ago. There are quite a few swing votes to be had, but then of course they could, as they're called swing, so they could really go either way. But only one opposition voice that is already slated to win, and that's Risa Ontiveros. On the other end, all the holdovers, majority, if not all, we're not even sure where Grace Poe will fall in terms of being an admin or a swing vote here. And again, it's going to be relatively smooth sailing in terms of the Senate if you are a former Senator Bongbong Marcos. Again, the very little opposition left
so
here.
That's the issue, no, with democracy. Do you want more opposition to have, a voice of the people? And we did see quite a voice during this campaign. I mean, there's much more opposition than one person that has been elected in the Senate. But on the other hand, do you want the laws to be passed as quickly as possible in the shortest time frame, diba?
Danie, you have to consider, Paulo, you have to consider culture in this situation. I am looking at several veteran, elderly senators there who are not likely to just follow what Bongbong Marcos wants. Because, lalabas yan, excuse me, tita mo ko, hoy, malaki ang tanda ko sa'yo, may tahid na ako dito, don't tell me how. Because in the last presidency with Duterte, the Senate managed to somehow maintain a image of independence or independent thinking. Now, with Bongbong Marcos coming in, while he is the landslide preferred choice of the voters, it does not necessarily mean that that's going to be smooth sailing in the Senate. I mean, umpisa mo na kay Amy Marcos, ate. Oh, kay Villar, tita. Diba? And all of this, that I think is going to come into play there.
And we also have, of course, Senate President very vocal against the Duterte administration, Ping Lacson as well, who had also ran. So these are sitting senators that are still going to be there. Okay, anyway, we have to put this to a pause for Cito. Let's move on to the local election scene because there's actually a lot of exciting things going on here. Now, 3 mayors in Metro Manila have just been proclaimed as winners. This morning, you've got incumbent Manila Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna makes history for being the first female candidate to win the mayoral seat over in the city of Manila. Meanwhile, House Deputy Speaker Win Gatchalian is officially moving to the executive branch as West Gatchalian as he is proclaimed the new mayor of Valenzuela City. Now over in Marikina, re-electionist Mayor Marcy Teodoro has won the mayoral race or is going to be predicted as such over the former mayor, and this will be his 3rd term in office.
Okay, as Bongbong Marcos sustains his lead in the partial and unofficial count, Vice President Robredo and Senator Ping Lacson have spoken about the presidential race and what's next for them. Vice President Leni Robredo expressed gratitude toward her supporters or the so-called kakampings. At the same time, she reminds the supporters to not sow division and to respect the outcome of the count even in the midst of reported irregularities.
Alam kong hindi madaling tanggapin sa inyo ang mga numerong lumalabas sa quick count. Hindi lang panghihinayang, kundi malinaw na pagkadismaya ang nararamdaman ng ating hanay. Gayunpaman, sinasabi ko sa inyo, alam kong mahal natin ang bansa, pero hindi pwedeng maging ugat pa ng pagkakawatak-watak ang pagmamahal na ito.
Meanwhile, Ping Lacson tweeted on social media and said that he is going home and that it is time to serve his family for a change. Okay, we'll go for a quick break here. After a few messages, we'll return and continue with the coverage. Medyo nauutal na ako doon dahil
I think a lot of people are, trying to digest all of this information, Cito, this morning. A lot have woken up to this. A lot have stayed up late. But nevertheless, we will be bringing you much more coverage on this as it comes along.
This is Bilang Pilipino 2022 here on One News. All sides, all the time.
Political ads remain integral in Philippine elections. But up until this day, some quarters still question if ads really help the people make informed decisions. During the 2004 elections, Raul Roco, the man touted by many as the best president we never had, released a star-studded, goosebumps-inducing MTV, but it was overshadowed by the showdown of GMA and FPJ. Noong kampanya para sa 2010 elections, sinasabing mas tumatak ang dagat ng basura ads ni Manny Villar kumpara sa star-studded Regine Velasquez-led video mula sa kampo ni Noynoy Aquino. Pero si Pinoy ang binoto ng tao. In 2016, we saw creative promos from the Rojas, Binay, and Po camps.
Opo, tayo mismo. Ayusin natin ang Pilipinas.
Hindi ko kayo pababayaan. Lalaban tayo.
Sino pa ba? Only Binay.
But the person with the more simple ads emerged the winner, Rodrigo Duterte.
Tigilan na ang kalokohan. Ang walang disiplina, disiplinahin. Disiplina Duterte para presidente.
Aspirants should be ready to cough up close to 1 billion pesos to mount a decent campaign sa mga kilalang media platforms. Depende sa television network at oras sa pag-ere. Sinasabing ang average rate ng isang 30-seconder ad ay mula 500,000 hanggang 1.4 million pesos. But despite the cost, it is seen that campaign teams will still heavily place political ads on traditional mainstream media this year. Ganyan ka-effort at kalaki ang budget para lang tumatak sila sa ating mga botante. Kaya may payo sa mamamayan ang mga image experts.
Magiging mas maganda ang pagpapaliwanag ko kung meron akong dokumento.
In the first place, bawal ang notes. Yun ang patakaran ng COMELEC.
Natatakot ka at ipakita ko yung dokumento na ikaw tinuturo ka rin.
The problem is, it is your document. And if you confront us with the document, we're at a loss whether it's authentic or
Pero kaya tayo may debate para makilala tayong mga kandidato. Ang kinikilos ni Vice President ay magpapakilala sa kanyang uri ng pagkilala ng isang debate.
During that time, Twitter was already exploding with tweets bashing TV5 for the long delay. We were being cursed by netizens. The reason we couldn't go on air on time was that there were 4 candidates on stage at night. Miriam Defensor Santiago could not attend because I think she was undergoing cancer treatment or something. Jejomar Binay showed up with a bunch of documents. When Senator or Secretary Maro saw it, said that's not allowed. So there was stalemate, there was deadlock. Binay wouldn't go on stage without his documents. Maroas wouldn't go on stage if Binay came on stage with the documents. Both of those two camps were adamant. They were playing hard. They were, from Binay's side, they were saying it's just documents. From Mar's side said that's not allowed, that's not part of the rules. COMELEC Chairman Andy Bautista was around to say, can't bring your documents. But even with the COMELEC Chairman ruling on those documents as disallowed or not allowed, Binay insisted on bringing it. What tipped the situation was when Grace Poe and Rodrigo Duterte, who were sharing a makeup room together, decided, out of boredom from just being inside the backstage makeup room, decided to go on stage and have a joke around with the audience.
Bakit naman nila ayaw tayong magsama sa isang kwarto?
Pwede naman. Nagtataka din ako.
Ikaw ata nagsabi, huwag mong ipapasokin si Duterte dyan.
And when Maroas saw them on stage and having laughs with the audience, he decides, okay, wait a minute, I'm going out. Okay, so he went out. When Binay saw him on stage, he decided to go out na rin without his documents. That debate revealed character. All our parties will have the same political platforms. They'll make the same promises. So given that similarity, given that sameness, really, people, you can't fault people for voting based on personality and character. Surveys on who performed best on that debate of ours in Cebu showed that the top performer was Grace Poe. Okay. But what was interesting is the second top performer in that debate turned out to be Duterte. I think that provided him the momentum.
Sir, kamao ka mo sayaw?
Kamao, oy. Lamay.
This guy is a master of political seduction.
Well, I think it's the fault of the yellows. They trained their guns so much on Binay. They thought Binay is the is the front runner because he was really leading the service way before their May 2016 elections. Inubos nila ang bala nila. Hindi nila napapansin si Duterte. Inignore nila eh. Inignore nila. So, kala nila kailangan nilang sirain ay si Binay. And so talaga sinira nila ng gusto. It worked. It worked. Except that they didn't realize, they thought that Mari will benefit from it. It didn't. Because people who are, the demographics, the people who would have voted for Binay but were turned off of this corruption are the masa. And they voted, di ba? They voted for Duterte.
Get to know the story and the legacy of the 16 presidents of the Republic. Chronicles, here on One News.
Welcome back to Bilang Pilipino 2022. We are delivering the news to you from the One News Data Monitoring Center here in Mandaluyong City.
Now, as mentioned earlier, Manila City has elected its first female mayor in history. But that is not the only achievement of the incumbent Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna in this year's race. She also bested the children of 3 former Manila mayors. To tell us more about this victory, we have News 5 correspondent Romel Lopez reporting to us live from Manila. Romel, ano po yung latest?
Yes, Danie and Cito, as far as the election returns here in the city of Manila are concerned, we can expect a lopsided win for Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna and his running mate, Congressman Yul Serbo. Lacuna and Serbo may just have to wait for their formal and official proclamation today. Since the opening canvassing here in the city of Manila last night, it was clear that mayoral candidate Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna is on the lead. Her running mate, Congressman Yul Serbo, who's vying for the vice mayoral position, has been leading his race as well. Despite a heated exchange of accusations during the campaign, Lacuna was on the lead all along, while the battle for the vice mayor has been between Servo and his closest competitor, another actor, Raymond Bagaching. As of 3:48 a.m. for the position of mayor, Lacuna obtained 498,937, and second place is Alex Lopez with 155,164, and then Amado Bagasting, who got 106,746. For the vice mayoral position, Servo got 543,710 votes, while Raymond Bagaching is far second with 169,709 votes. The canvassing of votes will resume here at the Session Hall in the Manila City Hall at around 10:30 in the morning, with just 10% of votes remaining to be tallied. For other local positions, it has been dominated by Ascenso Manileño Party, Lacuna and Servo's political party here in Manila. But for the other hand, despite being the mayor of the city of Manila, Moreno lost his presidential bid here in the city. He only ranks second against Marcos Jr. Surprisingly, as we would have expected that Moreno will at least win here decisively. For the vice presidential race, it's Sara Duterte winning the election here in the city of Manila, and she was followed by Dr. Willie Ong and then Senator Tito Soto. We can expect Cito and Danie, that newly elected set of officers here in the nation's capital, will be proclaimed formally here today. Should Lacuna win, she will be the first lady mayor of the city of Manila. Cito and Danie.
Romel, how are the opponents taking it? Because in some cities, in some towns, there are protests, accusations. Ayaw mag-concede. Dyan sa Manila, what is the situation like?
Yeah, well, here in the city of Manila, just like what I mentioned a while ago, it has been dominated by Ascenso Manileño. So that's from the mayoral candidate down to the congressional candidate, then to the sangguniang panglungsod or yung mga konsehal. And then we can expect a little resistance here in the city, well, just for other candidates, like for the congressman, because if you will just look into the surveys here in the city of Manila, they have been winning it survey-wise. So we have a clear overview of what might be the outcome. In the mayoral position, that's another story, because we know that mayoral candidate Alex Lopez is very vocal, and we don't know yet what will be his reaction so far, because there have been a lot of exchange of accusations between Alex Lopez and, of course, mayoral candidate Hani Lacuna. And we have yet to hear maybe if Alex Lopez will concede anytime soon, but we haven't heard that at all. Cito and Danie.
Romel, what were the polls showing for the opponents? Was it this far of a gap? What were the expectations?
Yes, we have seen a huge gap between, of course, the candidates of incumbent or the Ascenso Manileño, because that's the political party of Mayor Isko Moreno, Hani Lacuna, and Yul Serbo. And as far as I'm concerned, while looking at the results here last night, there were a very huge gap between, of course, the leading candidates of Ascenso Manileño and their opponents. And especially here in Manila, the Ascenso Manileño has really made its mark of, having this kind of trend. They have most likely monopolized the city of Manila when it comes to public service. That's why maybe they have gained this momentum, and maybe because of the legacy of Mayor Isko Moreno, and that's now the trend here in the area. But we have yet to find out what will be the norms or the reaction of majority of the opponents here in the city of Manila. But the thing here in the city of Manila, despite those accusations and heated arguments, there was never physical altercation here or commotion here. It's more on word war, as we can say. So we can hope that this election here in the city of Manila will end peacefully and orderly, just like what we all would want it to be. Danie and Cito.
Romel, nag-announce na ba sila kung may victory party sa Liwasang Bonifacio or Luneta, or because that seems to be the trend where even before the formal proclamations, may mga nagsasabi na kung saan sila magbi-victory party.
Yes, we don't know about that, because maybe the situation here in the city of Manila will be different, because Mayor Isko Moreno is on the losing end of the presidential race, though that might dampen the celebration of course, Mayor Hani Lacuna, who has been very close and has been the vice mayor of Isko Moreno. So with that, I cannot really answer it yet, and let's see how will Mayor Lacuna or maybe the parties here in Manila will respond later here after the proclamation of their winners here in the city of Manila, Cito.
Romelo, on the back of that, has Honey Lacuna laid out her plans for the city of Manila very aligned with Mayor Isko? To what extent did she say, she's going to continue the same programs that he did? Are there any new promises that she's made?
Yeah, during the campaign, we asked that question to Mayor Honey Lacuna. And of course, she wanted to continue the best practices that Mayor Isko Moreno implemented here in the city of Manila. But of course, she made it clear that with the mother's touch, okay? So, of course, Mayor Moreno has been tough and working leader here of the city of Manila, crisis manager, that's his projection here in the city of Manila. Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna would want to continue programs and best practices of the outgoing Mayor Isko Moreno, but she wanted to make sure that it will be a caring one, just like how a mother would take care of her children. And that's how she wanted it to do it here in the city of Manila. Mother's touch, ika nga.
Okay, thank you very much, Romel Lopez.
All right, now circling back to our discussion on Bongbong Marcos, of course, the campaign promises and what we were talking about, platform, no platform ba. But he did make some promises, Cito. So first, very specific, lowering price of rice to 20 to 30 pesos per kilo. We've actually had some interviews on this issue on whether that's even possible. Transport prices pa lang from the farm gate over to the palengkes is going to cost much more, and that might even depress the prices at the farm gate for some farmers here, lead to possible surge of importation of rice if the rice tariffication law is continued. So to what extent do you think that this is even a feasible thing, and then that made the public believe that such a thing is possible, 20 pesos per kilo of rice?
I won't get into that thing regarding whether it's possible or not possible. My concern is that there are people who believe it. In fact, this morning, I was exchanging notes with a rice trader, and I said, so rice will now be 20 pesos per kilo? And, we're friends. And he said, well, from pagkakaintindi ko, isa-subsidize.
Okay. So galing din sa taxes natin yan.
Yeah, isang bagay, it will come from government funds, which comes from our taxes.
Pockets.
But more importantly, there is this expectation. My concern about anyone's political promise, those who win will have to deliver or else. Dito, nangako ka, you promised 20 pesos per kilo. What happens now when we have a rice shortage in the region and in the Philippines?
Typhoons that you cannot predict. Yes.
And people want 20 peso kilo rice. Is it possible? Is it sustainable? And if you fail to deliver, what are the consequences?
Well, of course, this is a specific thing he's mentioned, so we can immediately check, diba, whether the prices of rice are going down to that levels. Another thing, very interesting here is the energy promise, which has been the talk for so long. Even the Department of Energy has been open to reopening nuclear power. But then we understand the difficulties involved in even the most developed nations are unable to reopen their nuclear power plants or are just not amenable to such risks, diba? I mean, this is another issue. So a lot of his promises are hinged upon lowering prices, diba?
Okay.
Lowering prices of electricity, lowering prices of bilihin.
Yeah. To be fair, Danie, okay, regarding nuclear power or nuclear energy for electricity, etc., it will all depend, it will be determined, it will come to a head based on the reality of availability of oil and the price of oil. Because right now you have the Ukraine-Russia war. China's in it already in terms of who's going to buy the oil, etc. So if we don't have oil or we can't afford the oil, where are we going to get our power from? Now, as far as nuclear energy is concerned, we can all debate until the cows come home. But here are the realities. Because we did 3-day series on nuclear power option on agenda in my program. And that was with Mark Coanco, who has been a 15 or 20-year advocate of nuclear power. We spoke to the atomic energy representative with the DOST. And they all said it will take 5 years to set things up. The quickest possible way is to get the South Koreans to come to the Philippines because they have a carbon copy of the Bataan nuclear power. They have 4 of it running in South Korea, and they have signified interest. So that is a possibility, that is a reality. And
after 5 years,
it may become a necessity. Yeah, but that's
another issue there as well, Cito. I think we've had these people as well in Business World Live, and they're saying, sure, there is this plant existing. We need the know-how, the level of skills, and these Filipinos that have that know-how, unfortunately, are not in the country anymore.
They're in South Korea.
They're in South Korea. So the number one thing is get these people in first, diba? To even just to do the feasibility studies requires these people to come back and commit to these types of projects. But, another issue apart from the nuclear power, which as we all agree, is something that's very, very long-term. Even the DOE is it's very long-term. It's not going to happen possibly not going to happen within the 6 years. But the possibility of renewable energy, that is on the table already. Diba? There are subsidies for that. There are programs in the government that are encouraging that. But at the same time, it hasn't been economical enough. It hasn't been as cheap as coal. It hasn't been, at least in the country.
Primarily because the mentality of government for the last 5 presidents, has been private sector must invest because government does not have the money. Time and again, we have heard experts say, most developed countries or developing countries found out that government needs to run public transport. We took that out. Baka naman ibabalik yung labas, hindi natin alam, no? Now, as far as renewable energy is concerned, it is still private sector driven. And the biggest obstacle to all of these possibilities or options is that government always makes money immediately. Hindi pa nagagawa yung project, they're already collecting taxes.
You have to sign the PPA already.
Yeah, but the problem is when Bongbong Marcos finally takes his oath of office, he needs all the money he can collect to pay 12, 13 trillion. Magkano na ba yung utang natin?
13 trillion.
13 trillion.
61% of our GDP, by the way, is utang. At the moment. So maraming ang investment and babayaran there. Cito, a couple of others that I wanted to go through. No, this one you might like. BBM to face media will no longer need a spokesperson. So we do look forward to having more engagement, with him because it has been, I would say, a challenge, of course, especially during the election campaign, to get him to sit down and speak. And he's saying he will no longer need a spokesperson. Is this his way perhaps to be closer as well to the people and the platforms that, social media nga allows every person to have his own say directly without a PR team, possibly without having to, go through several lines of communication just to speak to people?
Well, I'm sorry. I don't want to be a negatron on that subject matter, but his track record speaks for itself. He spent, 3 months avoiding the media. He has avoided interviews unless they were pre-screened, etc. So anyway, I think we better go to the news first.
All right. Meanwhile, another woman emerged as the winner over in the Metro Manila mayoral polls. Incumbent Makati City Mayor Abby Binay was proclaimed earlier for her third term in the city. To tell us more, we have News 5 correspondent Marty Bautista on the phone. Marty, what's the latest?
Yes, Danie and Sir Cito, good morning. Makati City seems incomplete, actually, without a Binay, as the Board of Canvassers officially proclaimed Abby Binay as the mayoral front-runner for the 2022 Philippine elections just this morning. Actually, last night at the Makati Coliseum, where the City Board of Canvassers took place, Binay had already led the canvass reports by as far as 317,290 votes. So that was exactly marked at 11 p.m. in the evening. This morning, though, Binay tallied a total of 338,819 votes, garnered compared to her mayoral opponent, Joel Hernandez, who only took 16,640 votes. So in attendance earlier this morning was actually the husband of Mayor Abby Binay, Luis Campos, who's currently serving 2nd Legislative District House of Representatives. He tallied a total of 164,114 votes. So the 4th District of the City of Makati held a total of 615 clustered precincts, but in those precincts, only 375,103 tallied who actually voted, because the total registered number of voters for Makati is actually 458,362. So this will currently mark Abby Binay's third and final term as Makati's mayor. Danie, Sir Cito.
All right. So again, unexpected outcome there, but very interestingly, we're going to have a Manila mayor and a Makati mayor, both female. Cito, what do you say about that? Thank you so much, News 5 correspondent Marty Bautista. Okay, so going back to our issues on BBM.
What I was saying
Go
before
ahead, please. Yeah.
that report came in, track record speaks for itself. BBM has avoided interviews, has avoided the media, and I don't think he will be engaging with the media until and only when he will have something to offer. I think he's smart enough to realize that he shouldn't waste his,
thoughts.
His landslide victory
Okay.
by carelessly throwing.
Don't make a mistake, which
Yeah.
was the campaign strategy, if you can
Yeah.
call it that, diba? Just don't make a mistake, because we were even observing the campaign trail. There were some candidates, not necessarily the front runners, but the other candidates, the more vocal they were, the more they showed up, bumababa yung surveys. Parang kung wala ka na lang sinabi, 'di ba? People take it against you. It gets spun in the media. There's a lot of context that gets taken out of context. So you're right. This is a strategy that has, as we can see, apparently worked for him. To stay quiet. So what's it going to take for him to? Why would he want to be more visible, to be more connected to the media?
Well, he will have to sell his cabinet to start with. He will sooner or later have to announce who his cabinet members are. And
He needs to step up, kumbaga.
Yeah.
And be a leader, diba? Be a and say what makes him different, for example, from his father, from the other opposition candidates that he won over.
Yeah.
And maintain a certain presence for the Filipino people that they are, of course, waiting for.
Because I do hope that they really manage that properly and that he has a lot of good things to say in the future, because the worst thing that can happen is that his first 100 days or his first 1 or 2 years will be full of having to respond to international criticism, into
Correct.
crisis management, etc. Because we've had presidents who went through that in the past, spending a whole year dealing with coup d'etats, political takeovers, etc.
Speaking of, another thing BBM did mention is that he will be continuing PRRD's war on drugs, so to speak, but more focused on prevention and rehabilitation. Diba? I mean, this is something that all candidates have said naman. There is a need to, of course, contain, or not even contain, eliminate this drug issue, but in a very, very different way, focusing on rehabilitation. But like you mentioned, this is something that the international community is going to be watching over yet again. Natabunan lang ng COVID, di ba, itong issue ng war on drugs, but it is there. It is an issue that will always be marking the Duterte administration.
And remember, Danie, that is the, how do you call it, the monkey on his back. Because even President Duterte made suggestions, remarks regarding, drug use of a presidential candidate.
Correct.
And Bongbong Marcos was being associated with
a former senator also recently
so
came out with
that's
that.
going to be his monkey on his back. And I don't know if his character is such that he'll just be dismissive of it. But if he's going to seriously...
Or go the other way and tackle it head
if he's
on,
going
diba?
to seriously pursue that path, then it is going to require bloody and determined action. I've always said that in my column, that after all has been said and done, we have not caught a big fish and we have not fried a big fish as far as drugs are concerned.
And whether the level of violence that could ensue with, of course, the power that is being given is been a question throughout this entire campaign period. Cito, another thing he is touting, which in my opinion is not necessarily something that a president can do, but is something that the infrastructure of the country can do. Our demographics of being young. This is cheaper internet access to Filipinos, diba? Without any, I might say, of course, DICT has been very helpful in this, but nevertheless, the internet boom has happened without much help from the government, diba? It's really just the investments of big companies, and now even China, so to speak, has come in. The people want internet in this country, and the usage of e-commerce, of e-payments, this just happened without regard to a president's specific plans for this to happen as such. So, cheaper internet access perhaps would really be the case anyway.
Yeah, your observation is on the money. That in spite of government's lack of action and commitment to the development of telecommunications in the country, we have managed, thanks to private corporations, private investments. But mind you, Danie, as Paolo pointed out, 67% of those who voted for BBM are young people. Young people who are dependent on internet and mobility on the web. Now, if Bongbong Marcos wants to have a centerpiece of his government, that has to be it.
Tama
He
ka.
has to
give the people what they want.
And what we
quickly.
need for the economy. It's not just, pleasing a voting segment. It is something necessary to propel our economy. Like our
Tama.
guest yesterday said, we need e-commerce, we need education, and, we just need the telecoms to be radically
and then everything
improved.
else will follow through, diba?
In fact, all Bongbong Marcos really has to do is sit down with all the leaders of the industry and said, okay,
Ayusin nyo
I'll
yan.
give you all a green light. Walang mga corruption, walang mangbabakal, walang manghingi ng special permit, and no need for construction permits, etc. You watch this country grow.
Interesting, and we will get back to these topics. We still have a couple more.
We'll be back after a few messages. This is Bilang Pilipino 2022 here on One News, all sides, all the time.
two-party system produced really, I think, the best and the brightest of both parties. Now, with so many parties, it's so confusing.
What does a multi-party system actually accomplish? It promotes negotiations, not election. Please take note that in this election, we will have a bigger number of districts with no election. Why? Because there will be no contests. The incumbent becomes too powerful, too moneyed, so that he erases all the opposition by buying off, negotiating their withdrawal. So, ang mangyayari ngayon, walang halalan sa maraming distrito.
Alam nyo, kung nananatili ang two-party system noong araw na yun, liberal at nationalista, saan pupulutin ang PDP? Ang ibig sabihin, nasa taong bayan. Pero hindi po pwede na yung political party, may isang mayaman na celebrate ng birthday. O sige, bukas may bagong partido na tayo. Hindi dapat ganoon. Dapat may plataforma, may panindigan. Saan yung pupuntang partidong yun? Maliwanag na may kaibahan sa ibang mga partido.
Maraming problema ma-address balimbingan. Dahil pwede natin gawin na pag ikaw ay nabibilang sa partido, sa dalawang partidong yan, pag bumalimbing ka, disqualified ka tumakbo. O di hindi ka na magbabalimbing.
To me, a two-party system could help, but there are preconditions. You need to have certain things in place. That's one. Strengthen the idea that parties are built along ideology and principles, not along personalities. Number two, sanction political butterflies. Penalize them. Prevent them. That way you don't have alliances shifting from left to right, depending on who's winning.
Get to know the story and the legacy of the 16 presidents of the Republic. Chronicles, here on One News.
Welcome back to the One News Election Data Monitoring Center. I'm Danie, Laurel, and this is Bilang Pilipino 2022. Now, for all the past elections, we have seen the markets react very quickly, whether with gains or losses, but ultimately always settle on the uptrend. Now, during the 2019 midterms, when the senatorial slate showed a clear administration win, markets jumped. And what is the investment community's reaction to what is looking more likely to be a Marcos return to power? Well, you can see that on my terminal here, a clear sea of red. And I cannot highlight enough, our index opened 2.2% in the red this morning. All shares down by even more. So all shares are all the shares traded, any publicly listed company in the local bourse, down by 2.5%. And mind you, this follows as we've already hit a technical correction. We were down by more than 11% since the February highs, ahead of the elections. And this has happened, normally there is a rally that goes on before election season, and when the administration is aligned the incumbent administration is aligned with the new administration, there tends to be a surge. That's what we observed in 2019. Markets had jumped. This does not seem to be the case today. Everyone from services down by 4.6%. Services covers the likes as well of telcos, utilities, even the likes of food like Jollibee is a service, industrials, the manufacturers down by 3.6%. I just have to highlight, composite index has now hit a loss of 3%. It opened down by 2.2%, and that loss is going even further. Property players, which are of course very closely linked to the Build program of President Duterte, normally benefiting from that, sliding by 2.8%. Holding firms, which are a proxy of our diversified industries as an economy, down by 2.3%. Mining and oil is the least hit here. That is down by 1.3%. Now, a lot to be digesting here, and I have with us to share his thoughts on what's going on, Luis Limlingan of Regina Capital. Luis, are you here with us?
Hi, good morning, Danie. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm not really hearing Luis this morning. We'll try to get back to him later on in the broadcast. Nevertheless, bringing our viewers' attention here to the movers. Okay, so I'm going to be pulling out here the chart, first of all, of our index since 1987, all right? So you can see, as I mentioned earlier, a clear uptrend. This is reflective, of course, of the GDP growth as well of the country. It hasn't necessarily gone down, never really changes that uptrend despite the outcomes of the election in the long term. But this happens to be a very sharp move downwards, especially as we had already hit the support levels even prior to that. 65.47 is now the levels of the local bourse. It's very, very closely into the levels that we have been seeing during the pandemic. Now I'm going to try and pull in Luis Limlingan here to see whether he can give some commentary on this. Luis, are you there?
Hi, Danie. Can you hear me?
Okay, I don't really hear. I have no audio with me right now, so we're going to try and pick that up from in a bit. Luis, are you there? I'm just going to try and fix my audio here with our team. Okay.
Sure, no problem.
All right. So, Luis, very quick question here while I'm fixing my audio. No, very quick reaction so that our viewers can get your quick reaction here on the major slide, PSEI 3% down this morning.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the weakness in the regional markets. So that the Nasdaq fell close to 5%. It's down year to date 26%. Setting aside first the election, I think the worry right now is inflation, what's going to be happening when they're going to be raising interest rates. There's a lot of key macroeconomic data happening in the US. They're looking at all the corporate earnings. They've been fairly disappointing, to say the least. And I think they have seen a lot of surprises on the negative. So the data right now that they're looking forward or are going to be assessing is not related to sentiment and anything that has to do with inflation. That's going to be giving hints to the Fed as to when they're going to be raising rates in the next few sessions.
Okay, sorry, Luis, just to clarify, we got the signal a little bit choppy here, but you're saying that a lot of this has to do with offshore issues as well. To what extent can you say that this is a reaction to the possibility that Marcos might be back in power, and to what extent is this just spillover effects on what's going on in the world?
Well, it's really hard to say which of the funds are reacting to what's happening in the US, and some funds who may have been supporting or were vying for Marcos, or those who were vying for Robredo, are reacting to the election results. What we gathered a few weeks ago was that it's not so important right now, at least for the near term, as to what the result is, but they want, one is a peaceful turnover, or I guess a transition towards the next administration. And I think second is they're going to be reviewing who the next president is going to be putting in their cabinet. So I think it's a wait and see. But I think right now it's rather just snowballing because of what's happening in the US. Given at least that there's still a lot of weakness happening regionally. I think a lot of the foreign funds are just keeping into cash.
Okay, thank you, Luis. We'll get back to you in a short while. Meanwhile, I think Cito needs to throw it to a break. Cito, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Danie and Luis. Now with presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. dominating the latest partial and unofficial count, numbers indicate he might just be the Philippines' next president. On that note, we have political analyst, UP Political Science Department Professor Aris Arugay live via Zoom. Good morning, Professor Arugay.
Good morning, Cito.
Okay, first off, if elected into office, or well, he will soon be, what can the public expect from Marcos Jr.? Will the people accept this win? Will there be unity as promised? Voices of the masses. What does this mean for our democracy?
Cito, these are all good questions. And honest to goodness, I wish I have clear answers for all your questions. But as what we have seen in the campaign, Mr. Marcos Jr. has only given us very vague statements on how he will be able to deliver on the promises and the motherhood statements that he has said during the campaign. We have heard all nice things from him: jobs, affordable rice, infrastructure. This is all well and good, and I don't think any Filipino would not want to hear all these things. But what we're lacking really are the mechanisms and the processes that are needed for this to happen. So I think the way to approach your question is to really throw it back to the Marcoses and ask them now that they can't evade anymore the tough questions is how are they going to govern? Because the last time a Marcos was president, he did not govern. He reigned like a dictator. So this is I think the burden of the Marcos dynasty.
Okay.
Now it seems that you have won the election, then the tough job comes in, the real job, which is to govern this highly fractious, highly polarized democracy that we have.
Okay, but what about on the international platform, Professor? Because I suppose, 48 hours after he is proclaimed or declared the next president, there is an expectation that foreign leaders will be congratulating him, etc. But there is still the lingering issue of the United States and the legal complexities or legal history of the Marcoses that does not allow them to go to the United States or face arrest. How do you see international relations play out? Are we going to be like an isolated Korea diplomatically, or do you think they're competent enough to wing it?
Right. Well, diplomacy has always been complicated, and our foreign relations is really a challenge for any new president. However, I do think some of the countries, particularly major powers, always see a change of leadership as an opportunity to reboot relations. And I think this is where if really he will be the next president, that Mr. Marcos Jr. needs to play our cards, the Republic's cards, because at the end, he is governing a democratic republic, that he needs to play and craft a strategy that will leverage our national interests. I think, unlike the outgoing President Duterte, he might not have the negative historical baggage that the outgoing president has, and therefore major powers might give him an opportunity to just show what he can do and how he can improve existing relationships.
I think we wish for all of that to happen, but given his legal issues in the United States, that would, I suppose, prevent the U.S. government from engaging with him because of that. Will that drive him to the arms of China? Because they've always said that in the end, China wins.
Right. My academic counterparts in the U.S. have actually not raised those issues, and they basically said that Philippine-U.S. relations needs to improve, even if it's a Marcos presidency that will be in the offing. What we need to be clear is that how the U.S. government will deal with this court conviction. We know that it's a contempt of court conviction. And whether there will be some talks, some negotiations that will somehow address these issues before the two governments, the Biden administration and possibly a Marcos Jr. administration, will be able to talk. So I think those need to be ironed out, and we will wait to what extent the Marcos dynasty, the Marcos family, will deal with this as well.
Prof, this is Danie, Laurel, jumping in. Based on the campaign narrative that BBM has presented, and even way before, he was always touted to be the successor to his father's so-called legacy, if you could call it that. To what extent should the public expect that he will align himself with the former dictator, and to what extent do you believe, no, this is his chance to possibly redeem the name, to do something completely different? There's a big chunk that are youth voters watching what's going to happen. What's your expectation?
Danie, throughout the campaign, I did not see personally any redeeming moment for the Marcoses. So it seems like now there might be this expectation that he will indeed redeem the family's name. But I think redemption only comes after a truthful admission. You can't be redeemed if you haven't accepted and haven't recognized the unredeemable things that you and your family have done. So I think if indeed that will be the narrative, the first question is, have they actually accepted? Have
Prof,
they actually
as a
apologized?
political analyst, give us an explanation why they don't want to do this. Because it appears, from the public sentiment, if they just do this, if he just owns up to certain things as other people have done, he might have more of the people's unity and sentiment.
Gloria Arroyo said, "I'm sorry." And they moved
Why
on.
isn't he doing this, especially now when he can, by simply doing this, possibly at least get a little bit of the trust of everybody else?
Right. I think because it's a slippery slope. Because they've been quite consistent in their line that they have told for decades that it's non-admission, it's silence, and this plays out with the strategy of revisionism. How can you really revise and really undo years and years of history and collective memory if you... So this is a path-dependent choice, because if they did accept, apologize even, but Cito, say politicians saying sorry, the qualifier there is always credibility. A politician can say sorry 1,000 times, but if he or she is not credible, that is just a word.
Okay. Now, my last question, I don't know, Dan, if you have another.
Go ahead.
But my last question, Professor, is given the fact that there are outstanding legal issues or potential legal issues that the Duterte administration faces in the International Court of Justice, the arbitration over the West Philippine Sea, and even the issue of the religious leader wanted by the FBI, how do you think will this play out under the Marcos administration?
That's also a good question. But Cito, my analysis here is based on previous actions of the Marcoses. Your question is pegged on accountability. So I'll quickly answer with another question. What is the record of Marcos Jr. and his family as far as accountability issues are concerned? And I think we can draw a lot from that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Professor Aris Arugay. Now, let's go back to Luis Limlingan of Regina Capital.
Hi,
Danie.
Luis. Thank you for still being here. All right. Again, you did react on the markets earlier on, basically saying that this is a mismatch. This is a, culmination of many offshore issues going on, plus our domestic issues as well right now. But tell us, let's discuss what the investment community wants from this next administration. What do they truly care about? And which stocks do you expect are going to be benefiting from a possible or an imminent Marcos presidency?
Well, I don't know if I represent the whole business community in terms of what I think the next administration should be focusing, but at least on what our House views should be the priority, I think, moving forward. And I'll just narrow this down. right? I think first would be helping the country still recover from the pandemic, and the tourism sector should, I think, be of utmost focus. Given that a lot of jobs were affected by this, um, it's easy to attract the foreigners back so long as we can promote the Philippines as I'd say, a safe alternative against COVID. So I think that should be one of the priorities. And of course, again, I'm saying this not in any particular order, but I think they should focus on it. The second thing I'd also want would be the BPOs. We've seen that because of the pandemic, the trend has been for offices to actually accommodate a work from home type of setup. So this might be more attractive. So if it becomes more beneficial to the employees, not just for work from home, but give them a setup that I think it's much more manageable, much more attractive, then I think the investments might start coming in. The third one, I would also like to see the administration probably put more focus on is maybe responsible mining, especially during this, I'd say, I guess, increased demand given what's happening outside of the region. Prices like copper, nickel, zinc might see a revival because of what's happening, especially because of the tension between Russia and Ukraine, which I think is going to be prolonged. The second to the last point, I think, would be the OFWs to help them, especially those who are trying to seek placement in the OPEC-related countries. These are booming economies right now because of the higher price of oil. The likes of Saudi Arabia are seeing their GDP grow by 10%. So probably the benefits and pay are going to be much better. Finally, I think just a continuation of the Duterte administration would be to continue with infrastructure projects. So these are with roads, better access to roads, communication, whichever is going to be improving business. So I think if they start hitting the ground running from day one, maybe investors will probably look and become or change their attitude and be a bit more bullish.
Receptive. Okay.
So I think
Luis,
those are
you mentioned several sectors. What about the regulated sectors? So the telcos, the utilities, the water companies, even the power, energy, media, these ran into some trouble with the current administration. Do you think that he'll be more open to, for example, foreign ownership limits, to deregulation, or will this be more and more regulated?
Well, I think in terms of ownership, I think it is a plus to consider foreign ownership because, again, it's extra investment. The resources, capital, and synergies that these foreign investors put in would greatly benefit these utilities. Again, the regulation, I think it's really much more difficult to maneuver because, for example, if it's water, electricity, they do rate rebasing also, which is based on inflation. And of course, if you're also a private company, your interest is to make it profitable. But at the same time, if you're delivering a service, you're trying to make it reasonably priced as well. So it's really a tightrope in terms of that type of that space.
Luis, forgive me, I'm not as sophisticated as Professor Laurel when it comes to this stock exchange, etc. No? But a big issue right now, or a question, is the business community, the business environment in the Philippines stable enough? And do businessmen and women or business owners and corporations feel secure enough that it will be business as usual? Because with the new presidency comes speculation, anxiety. Now, in fact, during the campaign, there were articles where certain individuals were interviewed and they said that they might immigrate or they might leave the country, etc. By and large, do the business people feel confident na hindi sila magagalaw, hindi sila magugulo?
At the end of the day, what the survey showed is what happened. So is this what they were, expecting naman?
okay, let's set the stage, right? The recovery is underway. So the Duterte administration is leaving at I guess, at a much more stable, I guess, a setting, especially given what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe.
Okay.
So at least it's at a manageable.
Fundamentally.
Fundamentally, right? I mean, you can make the argument about the debt to GDP, the inflation, and whatsoever. But I think given how no one predicted the pandemic, nobody predicted that oil prices would spike, I think they're managing as best as they can. I think what the business community is probably going to be keeping an eye on is the cabinet officials that are going to be appointed. For example, in the Duterte administration, I think he made it clear that economics wasn't his forte. So he left it to the likes of Secretary Domingo and Carl Tua to manage it, and they really did their job quite diligently. So I think that's what they're going to be looking at because, again, no matter how good a president you are, I think it's the people that you're surrounded with that's really going to be helping you, take the country to the next level, or if it's really going to, lower to its downfall.
Do the foreigners feel the same way? I mean, we haven't seen them come back in, diba, since the exodus, global COVID issues. But, we're trying to attract investors to invest in our stock market, foreign direct investments as well. Do they feel the same way na fundamentally it's okay naman regardless, or are they going to hold back?
And are we attractive enough, Luis? Because remember, we have competition in the region.
Correct. Now, okay. Right now, at the current pace, let's not be forward-looking first, just so at least it's much more easier to paint the picture. Our cases are much lower. If you see the surges in Korea, where I think a third of the population has COVID, or Japan, where we're seeing the surge right now, and hopefully, we don't see those numbers escalate. It's much better, at least. Okay? I'm not saying that it's the best, but at least compared to what we're seeing in the other regions, it's much better. Inflation, again, it's not the best. It's 4.8%, 4.9% last reading. But we're seeing in the States, it's going upwards of 8.5%. I've never seen, when I've been in the market, that we actually had a much lower inflation than the US.
Okay.
And it's already reflecting, or you're seeing the pinch already in corporate earnings. We're still seeing record earnings from a lot of the companies. I guess it helped that because it's an election season. We're still rebounding from a low base. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. So if you consider these and where we are right now, I think we're still at a much better spot than the other regions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Luis Limlingan of Regina Capital. Okay, now let's go back again to our data presenter, Paulo Del Rosario, to give us an update on the presidential and vice presidential races. Paulo?
Thank you, Cito. I honestly do not know how to transition to segue from business into this. But then when we look
they're all connected.
They're all connected for
me.
sure. But looking at the big picture of the race for the presidential and vice presidential races, not much has changed there. Realistically speaking, based on transmission data that we saw throughout the day, not much was going to change. But what we can do is literally zoom in into certain locations to see how the other candidates have done and put in the question on whether or not strongholds are still a thing when it comes to the national elections. We'll zoom in on here in Cavite, wherein former Senator Ping Lacson was actually from, and here he ends up at third place with 91,000 votes, and that fails in comparison to the second place, VP Leni Robredo, 497,000, and former Senator Bongbong Marcos with 1.1 million. So obviously would be very difficult for anything to change here. But then interesting to note that Ping Lacson is there at the bottom. Of course, we mentioned a while ago, former Senator Manny Pacquiao did carry Sarangani province. He's the only presidential candidate to carry his home region. or his home province rather. And interestingly enough, if you go to NCR, wherein we would expect former Mayor Isko Moreno to carry a larger part of the vote, third place here with 500,000, again paling in comparison to former Senator Bongbong Marcos and VP Leni Robredo, both of them cracking 1 million and above easily, while former Mayor Isko Moreno only at 503,000. So interesting numbers to look at there. But of course, if you look, as we mentioned a while ago, if you look at Metro Manila, the presidential race here, even in Manila, he did not carry the vote here. Talking about Isko Moreno, former Senator Bongbong Marcos ends up with 40% of the vote here, and Isko Moreno only with 33.99% of the vote. Cito, Danie?
All right, doesn't look to be much of a race there, Cito, but as already VP Leni has mentioned, the focus needs to be now on setting aside some emotions and trying to, work together for the country. So let's see what happens next in the next few hours on whether they will really be uniting in terms of their languages, and in their rhetoric.
Okay, that was Paolo Del Rosario doing the presentation on the far left of the platform. And beside me is Danie, Laurel. But thank you for tuning in on One News continuing coverage of the 2022 national polls. I'm Cito Beltran.
And yes, I am Danie Laurel. Thank you so much for having joined us. Stay tuned as Charles Lejano will continue to deliver you the news, especially the countdown of the votes. This is Bilang Pilipino 2022 here on One News.
All sides, all the time.